Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. It's time for challenge tournament number 2, epics only, but Ice Golem this go round. Last time they were offering a Prism Jewel summon for the Soul Summon pool, and this time they're offering a Prism Fragments or the Shard summon pool. So if we hop over to the Ice Golem tournament, we have 3 days to get essentially like a normal Ice Golem tournament, honestly. So 2750 as the top milestone, which is fairly doable over the course of 3 days, assuming you have nothing else to be working on. So it's more than doable with just the normal amount of energy that you will have. So that's good to note. But in this case, there is no Void Shard at the top, but you do have a chance at the summon pool. And then of course, if you have an easier group, always be sure to check how active your group is and see, because there's always the chance that you can walk away with some 6-star epic relentless gear. All right, so we hopped over here to the dungeon tab. Let's talk about the best stages to farm, starting off with stage 25, which is objectively the best quality gear for normal mode. And I do recommend doing this on normal mode. I've considered what you could do for hard mode, but there's just not as many HP burners and or activators that are epics only. A lot of those jobs are done by legendary, so it could be done, but it would probably be very, very slow, and it's just probably not worth the time to worry about doing hard mode. Stage 20 is still the most efficient in terms of points per energy, so that could be a very efficient stage, and obviously it's a lot easier to do than stage 25. And then if you're more in the early to mid game, then stage 16 is definitely the goal, because it's Void Affinity. You don't have to worry about bad affinity matchups, much easier, and you still have access to 6-star gear. And in this case, I have 2 teams to showcase to you, one for stage 20 and one for stage 25. So we'll start off with the stage 20 team, and this is meant to be more of the kind of, let's call it speed run composition, where it's a little bit more aggressive. We have no revivers, you can see, and we're running triple nuker, so we can try and get through the waves as quickly as possible, as well as get through the boss phase. But we are bringing in the ultimate support for this dungeon, that being Vogoth, because obviously he has his passive, which will kind of heal everyone else for the damage that he takes, but also he has the leech on the passive. So whenever our team gets turns, they will be able to heal themselves up with the leech, and so they won't necessarily be super low health the entire fight. And then of course we're bringing in a tried and true debuffer in Stagnite. So let's go ahead and run this composition. I haven't run it that many times, so I can't guarantee that this exact composition is 100% success or anything like that, because it is most certainly a more aggressive team. And so you could easily make one swap, drop out some DPS, and bring in a little bit more support to make this team more reliable. But the main thing to highlight here is, of course, we have the double nuker, but we're using Fenax because, one, he has the block revive potential on the A1, but also the block buffs on the A2 for wave 2 here. And then Vogoth, we're also holding off on his provoke until wave 2 so that we can protect our squishy nukers. And so a little bit of control between Fenax and Vogoth between the two of them. So essentially, we buy enough time to cycle back around to all of the nuking abilities, and then we can clear the waves in about, I guess, a little over 30 seconds. So now it becomes the air quotes hard part. You can see there we do have a bolster set that is on Vogoth, but there's also a shield set on Stagnite. And we've kind of set this up such that Fenax will always come around and block revive on one of the minions right at the start, and then we only have to worry about the one on the right. So we start basically the entire fight without having to worry about all of our defense being ignored. And we got good RNG this go around, and so both of the minions are gone, block revived, dead forever. We have decreased attack on the boss. We're going to take a big smack here, but it's not a big deal. It's going to hurt a little bit, but again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the leech on the boss, and so we should be able to take advantage of that to be able to heal up. So I was going to say, if Magnar triggers it, then Fenax might die. Ooh, that's very close, very close. Like I said, very, very aggressive team, but he survived, so he healed up. But we're going to get a lot of counterattacks back to back to back, because again, you know, for me in the end game, my epics are very, very overtuned for this particular fight, and so we're just going to be taking a lot of counterattack smacks because we're doing so much damage. So that is always the risk of a speedier comp in Ice Golem, that you could take a bunch of counterattacks back to back to back, and that could potentially wipe your run. But in this case, we're easily maintaining decreased attack on the boss, and we have the leech to be able to heal up in between. So pretty quick composition, I must say, and so just about 2-minute run. So let's take a look at the higher stage team for stage 25. So for stage 25, we're taking a completely different approach. We've basically dropped all of the nukers. We brought in more support with Rectored Wrath, and we're bringing in tons and tons of poisons because this is normal mode, so poisons are fair game. So we have poisons from Urgrim, we have poisons and poison activation from Venomage, we have poisons and poison activation from Dark Gale, and we have poisons and semi-poison activation, at least poison spread activation, however you want to describe it, with Akemtum. So quadruple poisoners, and then a Rectored Wrath who is going to be super, super tanky and should never die in this run. So let's go ahead and run this team as well. So there is a good amount of AI overrides in this composition, so we'll kind of talk over it a little bit. Rectored Wrath is allowed to do whatever she wants because she's just going to revive people when they need to and heal people whenever she can. But we do want to make sure that we have a lot of these abilities open or available for each wave. And so like Akemtum has open or don't use on the Hex ability because that allows his passive to spread the poison ticks, so to speak, with the passive. We have open or don't use on Dark Gale, so we can apply decrease attack, but also increase the duration of all the debuffs that everyone else is applying. Open or don't use on Urgrim's poisons, because we want them ready to go for wave 2 immediately, and same thing for Venomage, we want her poisons ready to go for wave 2. So pretty much that is the exact same for wave 2 into wave 3, the same open or don't use type setup. And then for Dark Gale, I also turned off his A3 because we just don't really need it. It is nice to have poison sensitivity, but it's only on a single target, so it's not mandatory that we have that one in particular set up. So rinse and repeat here, set up all the poisons, set up all the poisons, set up the Hex, and then extend all the poisons. And so, again, the reason we're bringing in Akemtum here is because the way his passive works is that whenever anyone takes a poison tick, everyone else under Hex will take the same poison damage. You can kind of see it activating on other people. And so that synergizes very well with our double, with our massive poison composition, but also the poison activators in Dark Gale and Venomage on the A1. And then if anyone happens to be low or go down, we have Urgrim there with the spot heal, as well as Rectored Wrath doing her thing with her AoE heal. So we're pretty much safe and sound from anything that goes on here. And then when it comes to the boss, as we'll see, there's a good amount of RNG as far as how quickly we can get through this. It depends on if we can kill the ads without triggering counterattacks. Because as you guys may know, that poison ticks do not trigger the retribution hits from the Ice Golem, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it if you can line everything up right. But the counter synergy to that is that Akemtum, whenever you activate poisons, they count as, or like activate poisons on other people under Hex, it counts as hits, and my Akemtum does have Giant Slayer. So every time we activate a poison on one of the ads, you can see we have potential to get Giant Slayer procs on the boss, which has the potential to trigger the counterattacks. So we'll just kind of see what happens. I think Venomage has War Master, Akemtum has Giant Slayer, and Dark Gale has Giant Slayer. So there is always a chance that we're going to get some retribution hits along the way, and we're going to have to restart as far as killing the ads. But if we do happen to get lucky here, we can just kind of spam our A1s from the poison activators. I mean, basically everyone's doing their A1s in this case. So Venomage is doing her A1 to activate poisons. Dark Gale is only doing his A1. Urgrim is doing the AoE poison as needed. Akemtum is allowed to place the Hex just in case of this exact situation. But aside from that, Dark Gale and Venomage are just using their A1s. And so we are going to be placing a lot of poisons still on, even if the ads respawn, we're still going to be placing poisons on them and activating them. And again, the nice thing is that just by attacking the ads, we still get credit for activating poisons on the big boss. And so you kind of do dual purpose there. However, I will acknowledge that there is a huge risk of not wiping, but you have potential to take some big smacks, because if you activate some of the poisons on the ads while both of the minions are alive, again, the Giant Slayer procs from Akemtum's passive can trigger retribution when both ads are up, which means the boss will ignore 100% defense. And if you don't have decrease attack, that could be very, very dangerous. But again, in my case, I have a super, super tanky Rectored Wrath, equivalent of what I would normally run on this type of composition being Pythion. And so she should be able to survive the hits. And she's Force Affinity, so she should not be able to be crit by the boss, so it's not that big of a concern. But again, I digress. So you can see they're about 3.5 minutes. This team is usually between 3 and 4 minutes, depending on the RNG of whether or not the minions respawn. In that case, we did get one cycle of them respawning. I've had it happen multiple times, and that's when it gets closer to the 4-minute mark. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the champion builds for the epics used used on these compositions, starting off with a Kemptum. So he's built in divine speed and crit damage sets, so just a little bit of crit damage because we did go crit rate on the gauntlets. And his total stats are 47,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, very low on the defense, 1,800, 247 on the speed, so fairly quick for PvE, and then full crit rate, 180 on the crit damage, and then 329 on the accuracy, which is most certainly overkill, but he's built to be able to do stuff in the Cursed City, so 300 plus is kind of where we need to be. And you can see that we don't even have a lot of his gear max, so he could have a lot more crit damage, for example, is unglyphed as well, so he could have more accuracy, but he just didn't need it, and this is kind of the gear that he was sitting in prior. For the blessing, I opted for cruelty because he does have a triple hitter AoE, which is nice for, you know, reducing defense, and then giants, or a triple hitter on the A1, which is nice for reducing defense on a single target. For the masteries, as I mentioned, we did come down the offense tree left hand side, coming all the way back over to Giant Slayer, so I did make sure to get that on him. And then on the support tree, we had some of the standard debuffer masteries. And a funny story about Akemptum is that I literally finished like building him up for a spider hard mode team, like finished the masteries and everything, and then a day later I got like Theodore and Calvlax from a Pogo event, and he got replaced in that team, so I remade into something different. So kind of a wasted effort getting in the masteries, but nonetheless it's still kind of useful in this particular instance. Next up, we have Rector Drath in a reflex set and a speed set. So if we take a look at her total stats, we have 64,000 on the HP, 32 or 3,300 almost on the defense. Very fast, 277. Don't care about her damage. And then 550 on the resistance, which is certainly overkill for this tournament, but she is built for Hydra Clan boss, so we want her to be able to resist anything the Mischief Head throws at us. And then also with Hydra in mind, we do have the Miracle Heal blessing on her, so she can restore destroyed max HP with her healing from the A2, as well as her passive whenever people are under Veil. And obviously the Veil is the primary reason that we're using her for Hydra, but also the revive with the Veil is also pretty nice. And for the masteries, we're indexing even further into resistance with Unshakable, getting a lot of supportive things, less damage from crits in case I want to use her in the arena, which I used to, but I do it a lot less because I have a lot better supports now. Solidarity is also an honorable shout because it continuous heals, and the Veils will give everyone else extra resistance, which is kind of nice. And then of the support tree, we're getting a bunch of healing masteries coming down Lore of Steel for extra stats, and then making sure to get lasting gifts to extend the heals and or the Veil. Next up, we have Venomage, who is in double perception, and she's been through a myriad of builds over the years, but this is where she's currently sitting because she is built for Amius, since she is one of the best hero reduction champions for that particular fight. So her total stats are 57,000 on the HP, 4,000 on the defense because she is one of the targets for Amius, so I wanted her defense fairly high, in addition to having her blessing fairly high at 3 stars, 253 on the speed, don't care about the damage, and then 493 on the accuracy. I think you need a 475 plus, so that's where we're kind of aiming for in terms of hard mode Amius. For the blessings, I used to run her in Cruelty when I used her more in my core dungeon teams, but now that she's just for Amius, I switched her over to Phantom Touch for just extra damage whenever she attacks. And then for the masteries, pretty standard debuffer support type build. So we have the offense tree hugging the left hand side, coming all the way down here to War Master on the left hand side, and then on the support tree getting a lot of the debuffer side masteries, Lore Steel, Evil Eye, and then Sniper to increase the chances of activating poisons on the A1. In the compositions that I was running her in, I ended up not needing it, but I would definitely recommend Master Hexer if she's like one of your only poisoners on your account. Next up, we have my super tanky Ultra Urigrim. He's in a 2P Stone Skin Perception and Immortal build, so just a lot of, or a hybrid build of accuracy and resistance. Formerly built for Dragonheart, but he has since been replaced. 65,000 on the HP, 3,700 on the defense, 255 on the speed, so fairly quick for PvE, 466 on the resistance, and 369 on the accuracy. So once again, he's built for like hard mode dragon, so to be able to resist all the poisons and be able to still land his poisons. So those are the reasons for his relatively high stats. And then for the blessing, I've been sitting on Commanding Presence because he hasn't really needed much else, but I will consider changing it to which one is it? Nourish. I don't know. I can't recall exactly if he is featured on one of the hard mode Fire Knight stages in Centranos, but having him restore some destroyed max HP with continuous heals, as well as boosting the quality of the continuous heals, might be useful. So I might end up swapping to that. I'll have to see in the future for rotations of the Cursed City. And then for the masteries, kind of echoing Rector Drath a little bit. I guess it's a lot different, but coming down the defense and support tree, indexing more into resistance, so we're getting unshakable there. And then we're kind of doing the split between Lasting Gifts and Master Hexer, because he is both a buffer and a debuffer. So we want to split the difference there, which usually forces you to come through Cycle of Magic, Lore Steel. And then we're getting a little bit more HP and healing masteries, and then also trying to get Arcane Celerity for all the poisons he's going to be placing on the A2 and the A1. And then we have Dark Kale, who's in Relentless and Retaliation. A very interesting build, but he is built for a hard mode dragon, still one of the best. And I use him in the exact same way as I showcased here, where he basically just extends the poisons of other people, and they can also activate them on the A1. Relentless is really great for that. Lots of extra turns. Can really speed up a run if he gets good RNG. So almost 50,000 on the HP. You don't really care about his attack, but it's around 28 or 2,900. 2,500 on the defense, 245 on the speed, full crit rate, because you do need that to extend debuffs on the A2. We don't really care about his crit damage though. And then 353, enough accuracy to land his abilities. For a similar reason as Akemptom, we are running him with the Cruelty Blessing, because he does have a big AoE here, which can reduce their defense, but also once you get to the boss stages, single target, triple hitter, we can reduce their defense very quickly and maximize the effect of Cruelty. And then for the masteries, again, a pretty standard debuffer type route. So the offense tree hugging the left hand side, coming back to the middle for Giant Slayer, because he does have a triple hitter, and then picking up basically the entirety of the right hand side of the support tree, ending on Sniper and Master Hexer through Lore Steel and Evil Eye. For the speed run stage 20 team, the champions are as follows. We have Stagnite here and Immortal in a shield set. So that was why we had part of why we had such a massive shield going into the boss stage. Not mandatory, but it is of course helpful to reduce the initial bouts of damage. 73,000 on the HP, 2,900 almost on the defense, 251 on the speed. Don't care about the damage, and then 365 on the accuracy, which is enough to land it in the Cursed City and hard mode stages as needed. He ended up not being needed for any hard mode stages, but nonetheless I kept his build the same. As a general rule, for most of my debuffers, AoE debuffers, I do use Cruelty on them, and so he is no different. So AoE, decrease defense, decrease attack, might as well lower more defense with the Cruelty Blessing. And then masteries, not done. One of these years, he's in the bottom of the queue, and I really do want to get there, because I do want to get him War Master, and I do especially want to get him Sniper, because right now he's technically at a 95% chance to land his all of his abilities. So eventually he will work his way up the mastery queue if I ever get the chance to do masteries. So that is a work in progress. Next up, we have my Vogoth in the only bolster set on my entire account, and it is not that great, but Immortal to pair with it as well. And we can see here total stats, 97,000 on the HP. So you can see we indexed heavily as much as possible into HP. Don't really care about the defense, but it is nonetheless 2,800. Very slow, because he is just a meat shield. I don't need him to take that many turns. I just need him to soak up damage and spread healing to everyone else. So 156 on the speed, and then 449 on the resistance, high enough that he can resist some things, but not everything. And then 227 on the accuracy, enough that he can still work in some of these lower level dungeons. For the blessing, honestly, I didn't put much thought into it, kind of like Uragrim, where I just put Commanding Presence on him, and maybe I'll evaluate it later if I need him to do something else in the future. But for now, it's just going to be boosting our aura a little bit, whatever it may be. And then for the mastery is completely different. We're coming down the defense tree, focusing on that. He is again a meat shield, so he's going to be taking damage on behalf of other people. So a little bit of ally protection, or half of a guardian set. We're also doing a selfless defender, so we can take a lot of the first hit of first instance of damage for everyone else. So mostly focusing on the defense tree, but also picking up some of the healing masteries. Again, his passive does heal, so we want that. And then Lore Steel for a little bit extra HP, because we do have him built in Immortal. Next up, we have Magnar, who was also featured in the Fire Knight Epics Only tournament, and his build has not really changed. So we're in Savage, and then 2-piece Stone Skin for a little bit of extra HP. So 84,000 on the HP, and you might have noticed that his chest is not maxed out yet. So he really should be somewhere around 87,000, give or take. 2,500-ish on the defense, 178, so fairly slow on the speed. HP percentages on the boots is why. Full crit rate, 215 on the crit damage, and then we don't care about the accuracy or resistance. No blessing, but I would probably go Crushing Rend if I had it at a high tier. At a lower level, I'm not entirely sure yet. I might still just go Crushing Rend, just because I don't really want to change blessings that often. And eventually, if I do get him to 6-star, that's where he would end up anyways. But he's not going to benefit as much from like Phantom Touch, for example, just because he's not attack based. For the masteries, as you might suspect, he is a nuker, so we're coming down to the offense tree, picking up the nuker side of the blessings. So Heart of Glory, Ruthless Ambush, etc. Cycle of Violence is good too, ending of course on Helm Smasher to ignore extra defense on top of the Savage set. And then like I said, we don't really care about his accuracy stats, and so coming down the defense tree, and you can see we're trending towards like Retribution and Deterrence, stuff like that, but I didn't end up actually finishing it because I don't use him in Arena, for example. So for PvE, we're usually not taking that many hits. And if we are taking hits in content where he's used because he's super slow, then we're probably in a bad instance. Next up, we have the Certified Wukong Killer here in Fenax in a lovely lethal set, one of my favorite epics in the entire game, and the one I want to empower as well as get to fully awakened the most in terms of epics. So super squishy on the HP, 37,000, but we have 5.7k on the attack, 1,800 on the defense. Don't really care about the defense because as long as he puts people down with the A1, his job is done. 212 on the speed, full crit rate, 235 on the crit damage, and then just enough accuracy to kind of be serviceable in some of these dungeons, so 246 there. Crushing Rend on the Blessing, ideally this would be once again 6-star, so we can ignore a lot more defense, particularly in PvE content, but also still get a little bonus in PvP. And then for the masteries, again, we're kind of focusing on, well, this one's a mix of nuking and PvE type offense tree. So a lot of diversity here, but we still have Heart of Glory, for example, but we're coming down to Cycle of Violence in case he does a lot of damage. We're getting the extra speed from Whirlwind of Death. So every time he kills someone, he gets a little bit faster. Of course, ending on Helm Smasher, again, to potentially ignore more defense, but also coming down the support tree, getting a little bit more accuracy when he does some abilities. If I leave his debuffs on, he gets Arcane Celerity and then Evil Eye in case we're running him in like a Fire Knight or something like that, and they can reduce turn meter with the A1. And then lastly, we have Dark Elhain, also in a Savage set, and she is kind of like a Vogoth, but built super slow, one piece of reaction as well, but she's primarily like an anti-freeze champion. That's how I use her. Look at her total stats here, 39,000 on the HP, 5.6k on the attack, defense fairly low at 1,800, 153 on the speed. So she's not meant to go fast, but if she does get frozen, we automatically trigger her passive, and so she gets her big AoE off, and so we want to index more onto damage than speed because she's meant to be anti-freeze, as I mentioned. Full crit rate, 214 on the crit damage, and then we didn't really care about the accuracy and or resistance on her. No Blessing at the moment, she's not awakened, but I'd probably go with Phantom Touch while she's a lower level, and then obviously Crushing Rend if we can get it at 6-star. For the masteries, once again, a kind of a Fenax type build where a mix of standard nuker masteries as well as a little bit of the PvE helpful stuff. So Heart of Glory again, Whirlwind of Death, same thing, Cycle of Violence, ending on Helm Smasher for potential to ignore more defense. And then we're coming down the defense tree. You can kind of see we're trending towards ending on Retribution, but again, she's not a primary nuker on my account, so I ended up to not finish out her masteries. All right, so yeah, those were the two teams that we showcased, one for stage 20 and one for stage 25. Of course, if you don't have these champions, we could talk about some alternatives that you could use for epics only. In terms of poisoners and or HP burners, I think I pretty much covered majority of the epic poisoners in my composition, but I did not cover my Celiac Priest Ornn, who's somewhere down here. So he does have AoE poisons and poison sensitivity. It's just not 100% chance, so I don't like using him. He's not my favorite just because he has a chance, you know, a small chance, but it is a chance of literally doing nothing, or worse, placing poison sensitivity with no poisons out there. So I'm not a fan of him in particular, but nonetheless, he is an honorable mention. And then for HP burn AoE, I think you have Akoth the Seared, who I don't have built, and then of course Mordecai. I think Frenzy the Cackler can also activate it on her A1, a Void Epic, but it's a 50-50 chance, so that's just not, in my opinion, reliable enough. And if I was going to try and do HP burn activation, I would just run Dark Hail because he can activate poison and or HP burns on the A1. For the debuffers, we did highlight Stagnite, but you could also use Duck the Pierce depending on the stage you're going for, the affinity matchup. Duck the Pierce also has decreased defense and decreased attack, so they're kind of interchangeable in that regard. Although Stagnite has decreased speed on the A1, Duck has decreased accuracy on the A1, so a little bit of difference of utility there. In particular, if you're dealing with stage 20, you could run Ugo for the block buffs and decreased defense, so you don't have to worry about reflect damage on wave 2. You can also run Deacon for turn meter manipulation, decreased defense, but also the Leech on the A1 if you're not running a Vogoth, so that way you can still get Leech out there. And then actually, I think Mistrider Dahi would be pretty cool to run. I didn't run him, or I didn't choose to run him, but he does have decreased defense, force affinity, so he could work for stage 25 as well. lots of extra turns, super fun to run. And when it comes to supports, I did feature Vogoth and Rector Drath, but you could definitely use Godseeker Neri as well. Healer, Reviver with the passive, as well as her active ability. White Dryad Nia is actually pretty good for this fight. Ally Protection, weak version of Strengthen, but also the spot heal and resetting of abilities could be useful. Rearguard Sergeant, same thing. Decrease attack, AoE, 75% chance, notably, and then continuous heals, Ally Protection, same thing. You can kind of use her to sacrifice herself on behalf of the team if you do get a counterattack. Miscreated Monster, same thing. Ally Protection, but also a big shield based on damage. And then nukers, if you want to use them in your composition, it's kind of whatever you have. I featured Fenax and Dark Elhain, but you could use a ton of different nukers. Magnar, Hoskarul, so there's plenty of options for epic nukers. Grust the Mangler is a good hybrid support slash nuker. So whoever you have, they could probably work in a composition. For the higher stages of Ice Golem, I typically just opt to index more into the poison composition, poison activation, because I think it's just more reliable than indexing more into damage, as we kind of saw on the stage 20 team, where we're getting counterattack after counterattack just by doing one ability on one of the nukers. So you could definitely get to the point you start to over damage the boss and thus take a lot more damage, which may or may not be necessary. And so I tend to opt more for the poison type strategies, so you push higher into Ice Golem. Normal. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's video, highlighting a couple of teams that you could run for the Epics Only Ice Golem tournament. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you plan to use and if you plan to participate in the tournament at all. I do recommend it because I don't think there's much else going on right now, but also especially more if you're interested in the summon pool. Hopefully you do get an easy group, and as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.